Ethereum is designed to be a decentralized, trustless network of an almost infinite number of participants. But when Ethereum launched, the number of services you needed to run was only one. There was only one service that you needed in order to participate in the Ethereum network. With this in mind, what we now call the execution client is this one service. With the execution client, you can manage your wallet. That means you can send ETH and tokens. You can interact and create smart contracts. Nowadays, Ethereum grew in a number of ways, as we well know altogether. One of these numbers that grew is the number of services you can run on, for, and with Ethereum. You can run a full node, you can run a staking node. Some people know that you also can run an archive node, which requires a huge amount of storage for Ethereum. Yeah, I see someone nodding. Maybe you've done it already? Or tried it? Yes, right. It takes a long time to sync. You can trust the network to verify each block and each transaction. You can also trust a third party with your ETH to stake with, and they also manage your rewards. You can also use a centralized website to trade and to swap assets and NFTs. Or you can run your own node. You can make sure that every block and every transaction on the blockchain is valid. You can use it as your staking node without giving away your keys, and you have always full control of your assets. And you can run dApps on it. Today I'll talk about Stereum. Stereum is about running your own node. In the beginning of 2020, I read about Ethereum staking. Back then it was pretty new. So I read about the most commonly used client, consensus client. That was Prism. It is still the, by far, most used client, but it decreased a little bit in popularity. Back then, I created, because of the lack of any setups available, Prism Docker Compose. That's a GitHub repository on GitHub. You can still look it up. It's outdated, so I wouldn't recommend using it. But you might get some insight of how I approached the issue at hand at the time. After I created this setup, I joined the Medalla testnet. That was a testnet that ran on the Gorilla testnet. And almost all of the validator accounts that were on this Medalla testnet ran Prism. And I guess you can already imagine where this is going. Maybe some of you already know that story. Prism had a bug. And it stopped being stable. So Prism released a fix. They rushed to the rescue. But instead of fixing the issue at hand, it made everything worse. The whole network stopped finalizing. That meant it was unusable anymore. What we learned from this event was that client diversity is key for a healthy, secure, and stable network. What I learned was I couldn't rely only on one consensus client. So I dropped the idea of Prism Docker Compose and came up with a new one. It's called Ethereum 2 Docker Compose. Very original, right? With this new repository, it was a little bit too much work for me to handle alone. So I onboarded a new team member. That's Baisa. And with Baisa's help, we generated, we not only supported Prism, but we also supported the other three consensus clients at the time, the major three ones. So we had Lighthouse, Nimbus, Prism, and of course, Tico supported. Next, we created a CLI user interface. That's a ugly looking UI for SSH sessions. It wasn't very comfortable, but it did the job in guiding the user from setting up the node. That meant the user could choose if she or she wants to run an execution client, namely Geth, or rely on a centralized web service like infura.io, and choose one of the 4 consensus clients. After that, we also created a process of importing validator accounts, the same way for all the 4 consensus clients. So users didn't need to look up anymore how to import for the chosen consensus client. They did it the same way for all 4 of them, also in the CLI UI. We also integrated monitoring with Prometheus and Grafana. And that's basically it for the time being. Then David joined the team. David helped us with designing the graphical user interface. The graphical user interface that we implemented later had the same features as the CLI UI. You could choose if you want to run the execution client or rely on an external service. You could choose what consensus client you want to run. You could also import the validator accounts, again with the same process for all the 4 consensus clients. So you don't need to care what you really want what you are running. So with this new Stereum launcher, that's what we call the graphical user interface, the user didn't need to touch the CLI anymore. There was no need to install any packages through the CLI or hack some configuration files or read up of how to connect the consensus client and the execution client together. This launcher also runs on multiple operating systems. We support macOS, we support Linux, and of course we support Windows. The host machine, although needs to run a Linux, mainly Ubuntu or CentOS. Initially, the setup only took 30 minutes. After these 30 minutes, you have a complete node running. You could start staking. That was great at the beginning because sync times back then of the beacon chain were pretty low because the chain was pretty short. Right now, it's getting longer and longer, it's getting bigger and bigger, and the sync times are getting somewhere where Geth is. So it's also a little bit cumbersome. We came up with the solution of fast sync. Fast sync copies an existing backup of the consensus client's blockchain and installs it to the user's host. Then the consensus client can pick up where the backup was left off and simply syncs to the top of the head. That takes only 10 minutes or something. So it's way faster than syncing from Genesis to head. Monitoring is one of the aspects that we also focused on. Stereum also includes a dashboard for each of the consensus clients that's available. So if you choose Tico, you will also get a Tico dashboard on your Grafana or automatically installed. So you don't need to worry about looking for that and downloading it again and so on and installing it again. There is also a dashboard to monitor your CPU and your storage and stuff like that. So you don't only have access to some metrics of the blockchain, you also have access to some metrics of your host. Next, we integrated a Stereum mobile app that's runnable on iOS and Android, of course. And you connect this app to Grafana, which makes it possible to receive alerts from Grafana on your mobile phone. So you don't need to check anymore, maybe once a week. You can just let it run. And don't need to worry, because you get your notifications on your phone anyway. So what is a service of a computer or device, or a mobile device? Okay, like it's some kind of a program that acts or reacts on user input and produces some kind of output. I guess that's how you could describe it. Services got APIs. They got maybe a user interface. They got some connectivities like peer-to-peer networking. Maybe they even got some CLI commands you need to care about. The average user doesn't care much about how to wire 6 to 10 services to get the maximum output of a staking node. And who can blame them? Most people in this room don't know how to repair or build a combustion engine, and yet we still drive cars. These services also support some kind of APIs. Normally they get drafted in in some kind of specification, with lots of people looking over them and reporting issues in the process, reporting issues in maybe also the implementation, and they change over time. It's not a constant specification that gets released, and that's it. One example is the beacon chain API that changes every couple of days. You can look this up on GitHub. And this is a problem for users to keep track of these APIs and have an understanding of what's compatible with each other. Ideally, first comes the specification, and later comes the implementation. But that's not always the case. Like we saw with the consensus client, validator APIs that the teams just came up with, however they saw fit by the time. They needed a solution fast to make staking possible. So each of the teams came up with a different solution, a completely different process, completely different API. Now we have a validator API coming up. And consensus clients rush to implement it to get more support from different providers. What you see in the red zone is what Stereum 1 covers. It covers basically a solo staking node. We will keep maintaining Stereum 1 even after we release the version 2 of our tool. Stereum 2 is the green area you see, and you see it's expanding. This will be Stereum version 2 in a couple of months. And we don't want to stop there. We want to include new operating systems for hosts, for example, macOS and Windows. We want to integrate more services to cover more use cases for users. So Stereum doesn't collect any user data. The only interaction you need to have with us, you go to the website, you download it, and that's it. We support our users, however, through Discord, through email, and direct messaging. Our handles of some of our team members, including mine, are on the website. So we get chat up every couple of times. It's not unusual that we get requests like something is not working or whatever. And once it was like every other issue. Once one guy chatted me up, he had a minor issue with one of his nodes. He ran multiple nodes with Stereum on mainnet. And it was a quick fix, and that's it. We stayed in touch. He also had some really good feedback that we used to make Stereum better. And after a while, he came up with another issue. And normally, people have all the same issues. They don't find different issues. Usually, they find the same issues at the same time. But this caught me a little bit off guard because he was the only one reporting some issue with the validator account list. That's basically the part of the Stereum graphical user interface that lists the validator accounts. So we started to investigate and looked into that. Because we don't have any access to nodes that run Stereum, we asked a lot of questions and so on, and we came to the conclusion that he ran a 3-digit number of validator accounts on his Stereum node. Just to be clear, that's 100 or more validator keys on one of his nodes. When I found this out, I almost fell out of my chair. This was the time when we realized that this is used for a huge amount of assets, not only for some small solo stakers, but also for people who put in lots of assets and stake with them. This was also the time when we realized how many people actually use our software that are not measurable because they don't join our Discord, they don't show up on our Twitter followers or whatever. And this was also the time when we realized we need to do better than Stereum 1. So we came up with the idea of the version 2. Again, back to the car driver. The average car driver, as I already mentioned, doesn't necessarily know how to fix or build a car. They don't know how to do repair their car. They just want to go from A to B, and who can blame them? But the funny thing about cars is you can still fix them if you want to. You can look up YouTube videos, you can read books, you can get tools, you can get machines, you can get spare parts and fix them on your own. With Ethereum, it's the same thing. The average user doesn't care how to connect the consensus client with the execution client. The average user just wants to cover his use case, for example, staking or running a DApp node. For this reason, Stereum 2 exists. Stereum 2 is open source. Everybody can look at the code, like you can look at the parts of the car you bought. You can also fix it yourself, or rely on us to fix it. You can even release your own version. Well, you can't do that with a car, but I guess you'll get my point. With version 2, it will be also available to possible to swap out parts of it while it's running. I'm mainly talking about the consensus client here, because that's the easiest part to swap out. And it also makes the most sense to swap it out, especially when you run Prism at the moment. The version 2 will provide a coverage of use cases. It won't stop just by providing a tool to run services. Stereum 1 is about solo staking. Stereum 2 makes this only a part of it. This means we don't only cover solo staking. We want to go further and support SSV networks to run valid operator nodes as easily as possible, to make it possible for people to earn as a node operator, even if they can't put up the 16 or 32 ETH for example, Rocket Pool node or real solo staking. With version 2, it's also way faster. I talked about earlier, it's about 30 minutes with the version 1 to set up a node until it's running. With version 2, it will be just 3 minutes. 3 minutes from logging into and having a running node. Also, Stereum 2 will provide the basic monitoring. You don't need any more Grafana and Prometheus just to read your CPU stats. But you can install the enhanced monitoring features and keep track of every metric you can think of your consensus client, of your node, whatever. We started with version 2 development just at the end of last year. And the goal was, or the vision is, to have a maintenance-free Ethereum node. So you can use it and not care about maintaining it. We started with the backend, because that's the most important part when running a node. You want to have it stable. You don't want to hack some configuration files or get stuck in some backend processes. With this in mind, we created lots of tests before even we had a page of user interface implemented. We run currently on 30 different virtual machines, different tests, to ensure that with every commit, every pull request, we have a working environment again. And talking about client diversity, most people think about consensus client. They don't think about the execution client, but still we rely on Geth very hard. I think it's close to 90% of execution clients run Geth. But that's not the only service you can diversify. There is, for example, SSV. Most of us think of Blocks SSV, I guess. But there are all other SSV providers as well. For example, Obel SSV. And of course, Rocket Pool is one of its kind right now. So I mentioned the 3 minutes earlier to set up a node. With this, it's simply impossible to just download the blockchain like we introduced earlier with FastSync. So we talked with a test.io and came up with a different solution, because the synchronization via infura.io that some clients, consensus clients, offer us is nice to have, but is completely centralized. With our idea that we call SyncLink, you can do the same thing, but not relying on only one service that provides the checkpoint, but actually accessing multiple endpoints and figuring out which one is the best one and most trustworthy to jump in. So the 3 minutes might get to 3.5 minutes. And one of my favorite features is languages. English only covers 20% of world population. Only almost 20% of people on planet Earth speak English for their first, second, or third language. We will provide support for 9 different languages with version 2. We will also do this via bounties, because of course we don't know that much languages, at least spoken ones. So what you see here is the Stereum alpha. That's just finished a couple of days ago. I won't show you the full a real demo, because it takes a little bit too much time, and I'm already running out. You see here you can already choose a server and save it. Here's a welcome screen. It checks if your operating system on the host is supported. And now you can choose different use cases. Right now only staking is implemented. You get what we call plugins, what basically the services are that you are installing. You can of course choose what path you want to run it into, install it into, and what network you're running onto. And after that, it's already preparing the node. That means it's installing system packages. It prepares configuration files for these system packages or for Stereum itself. That's what usually takes the longest. In this process, it also makes sure that the packages are configured correctly and suit the needs of Stereum. After that, you will see that the Stereum itself is installed. That means with Stereum 1, we had the graphical user interface as a service on the host. This is not the case anymore. The graphical user interface is completely in the Stereum launcher. This is not only faster to install, because you don't need to install it anymore. You get it already in the launcher. It is also safer for that reason, because you don't run a fully admin interface on the host. And here we're already starting the containers. That means the services I talked earlier are spinning up, which contains of Nimbus, a Geth, and Prometheus and Grafana. So we're done. Anybody check the time? This is how it looks like. So you can see here the service is installed. You can see we have one consensus client, one validator service. You can see the execution client, and you can see the service plugins. That's Prometheus and Grafana. This is not, of course, the final state of the product. It's just an alpha. And what happened next was that Martin, that's the guy who captured this video, also deleted all the configuration. So what does it mean to delete the node setup? It means that every configuration, every Docker container, every volume of this Docker container, this also includes keys, gets removed from the host. This is necessary if you, for example, want to reuse a node. We have this use case all the time when we test stuff. For example, if we test the compatibility of different services, or service versions especially. You have, for example, a new version coming up from one of the consensus clients, and we want to check if it's working properly with an older Geth version or something else. So we're doing us a favor here ourselves.
And our updates are automatic. If you just keep keeping configuration, you can set it on new execution. Is it automatic updates or?
Yes. So the updates of the services will be automatic. This is not shown in the demo that I just showed you, but this is also something why we need this flexible solution on testing out different versions, because we actually will publish kind of a matrix of what versions of what services will be compatible together and run well, and then the Stereum 2 will install the compatible service and update them automatically. Yes, so this is also something we have on our roadmap. So we come closer, even more closer to a maintenance-free, if you will.
And is that that's I'm guessing when you can check the maintenance window for block production. You don't have to worry about going to miss a block.
Yes. So maintenance window, when you already know when you will propose a block, is a big thing. This will be, of course, one of our goals, but it's a very advanced one, and I guess we will need to have to figure exactly out how to tackle this issue and not run into any problems so the node gets stuck before updating, for example. Because the last thing what we want is users having issues with stuff that actually wants to work. So our other contributions, we're pushing for decentralization. I mean, what we already do is probably creating a setup that is usable by most users that know how to handle a PC. Not speaking of CLI usage, not speaking about knowing about APIs or CLI commands or something, just using a PC. In the process of doing so, we break things. We break things a lot. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing because we show services and teams what might go wrong when you use the service in a specific way. We also try to participate into solving the solution. We provide a description of what happened. We provide log files and so on and so forth. The next thing is we do staking challenges. If you didn't hear of it yet, we have the upkeep and uptime challenge. That's a challenge every solo staker can participate in. You even earn a POAP badge for that, only for participating. And what we track is the performance of your validator account that you submit to us. Of course, the validator account, the exact validator account gets hidden away. We publish some charts, but they get pseudonymed, so you know what your validator is, but you don't know which public keys the other validators are. Also, you can win some NFTs when you're the lucky one and have a great effectiveness. We also provide some insights into Stereum on YouTube. Not only that, we also do some small updates on the Ethereum ecosystem, also on YouTube. If you scan the QR code, that's our website. You can chat us up on our Discord server directly or via direct messaging, of course. Then I want to thank Blockswap for having me here, and see you later.